Hey guys, tonight we're going to ride with the wind. You're on the back of a half-wild horse galloping across a frozen Mongolian plain before the sun has even bothered to show up. Your breath is already steam, your knees already ache. You've been riding for miles and you're not even halfway to the next station. There's no map, no snack. And if you drop this scroll tucked in your coat, whole cities might burn. You probably won't survive this, by the way. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, where are you listening from? Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Always fun to see who's drifting off from where. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink, and the wind immediately dries your eyes. Welcome to the Mongol Empire. It's early morning, somewhere in the 13th century, and you've been drafted into the world's fastest postal system, whether you asked for it or not. Your job: deliver a message across hundreds of miles of empire, through storms, through enemy territory, through terrain that occasionally tries to kill you just for existing. And no, you don't get to stop. You're one rider in a vast relay, part of the the Mongol communications network that made horses into lightning and news into strategy. Every 25 to 40 miles, there's a rest station, a new horse, and if you're lucky, a bowl of something hot. But for now, it's just you, the message, and the sound of hooves thundering like war drums. You tug your cloak tighter. It's made of sheepskin, stitched at the seams with sinew. Smells like wet barn and goat breath. But it's warm. Your boots are rawhide, wrapped in felt, practical, ugly. Never been in a fashion magazine, but they'll keep your toes attached. The saddle creaks beneath you. It's not the deep, cushy kind you might expect. It's built for endurance, high-backed, narrow, with stirrups that let you rise just enough to relieve the pressure on the horse during sprints. Mongol horses aren't particularly tall. They're compact, stocky, unimpressed by your modern riding apps. But they're strong, and they know the land better than you do. Historians still argue whether Mongol riders truly rode for days without sleep, or if the story was embellished by dazzled foreign envoys. But you're feeling it now, the rhythm, the trance of movement, the raw necessity of speed. You can't stop, because behind you, someone might be dying for lack of a message. And ahead of you, someone is waiting, counting the minutes like heartbeats. And here's a quirky tidbit: some messages were verbal. No scroll. Just your memory. You were trained to memorize entire reports, word for word, in case your scroll got wet, lost, or stabbed through. Think of it as the world's first encrypted voice memo, stored in the brain of a guy who hadn't bathed in 3 weeks. A hawk circles overhead. To your left, snow starts to fall. The track ahead is narrow, just 2 parallel ruts beaten into the dirt by generations of hooves. There's no sign, no mile marker, just the occasional post buried in the ground with a notch carved into it. 3 lines down means the next station is 3 hills away. You adjust your scarf and squint into the distance. Nothing yet, just horizon and wind. But you know the station is out there, with a fresh horse, a warm fire, and maybe, if the cook is feeling generous, a strip of dried meat that doesn't taste like boiled boot leather. You press your heels lightly. The horse understands. You move faster. This is not glamorous. This is urgency. This is infrastructure. This is what kept the largest contiguous empire in world history from flying apart at the seams. And you, poor you, are the thread. The wind bites harder now. You lean forward instinctively, squinting into the white blur where the steppe disappears into the sky. The sun is rising behind you finally, but it doesn't warm much, just lights up the frost like powdered glass. The horse's breath streams in thick clouds. Your thighs are numb, your nose, somewhere around mile 27, stopped participating in this conversation altogether. But there, yes, just ahead you spot a low plume of smoke, a signal, a promise, a station. You flick the reins. The horse doesn't need the cue. She knows. Welcome to a yam relay post. It's not much to look at a squat wooden building with a thatched roof, flanked by a corral and a stable that smells like old sweat and worse decisions. A few guards mill around the entrance wrapped in layers of fur, holding spears more for show than threat. You're one of them, after all. A börte, a relay rider in the Khan's own highway system. They see your approach. One raises a hand, half in greeting, half in question. You reach under your coat, past layers of damp wool, and pull out a small, heavy object, the gerege. This, friend, is your VIP badge. It's about the size of your palm, often made of gold or silver, sometimes bronze, etched with the imperial tamga and a simple but terrifying inscription that translates roughly to, "I ride for the great Khan. Delay me and die." It works. The guards step aside. A groom jogs forward, taking your reins before your feet even hit the dirt. You dismount with the grace of someone whose legs forgot how to leg. No matter. There's a bench, a bowl of broth, and praise be a new horse being saddled already. You don't unpack anything. You don't explain. The scroll or message you carry is not to be opened, not to be questioned, not to be admired for its calligraphy. It's a sealed order, a report, a military code, a supply chain instruction, or maybe just a letter from one noble to another saying send more sheep. Doesn't matter. The point is speed. Because this isn't just your message. You're one link in a vast chain that stretches from China to Europe, from Persia to Korea, across rivers, deserts, mountain passes, and enough political borders to make a modern passport weep. The yam system spans the empire like a spiderweb. Every 25-40 miles, there's a relay station like this one. Some are grand, others are glorified tents, but they're all stocked with fresh horses, fodder, guards, cooks, maps, and people who know the next leg of the route by heart. Riders hand off messages, change mounts, and are back on the trail in minutes. Some stations are positioned near natural water sources, others were dug beside artificial wells. The Mongols, after all, didn't conquer the world by leaving things to chance. They engineered this network, not for comfort but for relentless, unstoppable function. Historians still argue whether the entire yam was a revival of older systems, like the Persian or Chinese couriers, or if Genghis Khan designed it from scratch. But what's undeniable is that the Mongols turned a patchwork of trails into the arterial system of the largest land empire ever. And here's a quirky detail if you weren't a designated messenger. Touching the relay horses or stealing supplies from the yam network could get you executed on the spot. No trial, no note to your family, just the ground, the sword, and maybe a short comment about your poor life choices. You glance at your new horse. He's bigger than the last, darker, with a nicked ear and the expression of someone who has seen things. Perfect. The groom helps you up, slaps the horse's flank, and with a jolt, you're flying again, back on the trail, just like that. The station shrinks behind you, swallowed by the endless grass, Another 30 miles ahead, another station waits, and between here and there, wolves, wind, possibly bandits, definitely more numbtoes. You adjust your scarf and lean low again, the scroll snug against your ribs, the gerege hanging from your belt like a threat and a prayer. You are the messenger, and Asia just got smaller because of you. The cold eases not because it's warmer, but because your body's stopped complaining. Or maybe it's just given up. You're in the zone now, a zone of windburn, bouncing knees, and raw purpose. The second horse is smoother than the first, more responsive, ears twitching constantly. He's been on this stretch of the Yam before, you can tell. He leans into turns before you even nudge him, like he knows where the next message, the next mouth, the next mile waits. And this is exactly what Genghis Khan wanted. See, when most people think of him, they imagine fire, conquest, destruction. And fair enough, he had a strong world domination phase. But behind the burning cities and epic horse charges was something arguably more impressive, a nearly 13 million square mile infrastructure plan. Because conquering land is one thing, holding it. That takes communication. So the Khan built a system not of castles, but of stations. He called it the Yam, a relay network so vast it could stretch from Korea to Kiev, from the steppes of Mongolia to the Persian Gulf. And instead of relying on magic or messengers with questionable punctuality, he used the oldest power available horses, but not just horses, fresh horses, positioned at regular intervals, ready at a moment's notice. This wasn't a mail system. This was a nerve system. The Khan could twitch in Karakoram, and his generals would flinch in Baghdad by the end of the week. Historians still debate whether Genghis personally designed the Yam or simply expanded on older relay ideas. The Chinese had their couriers, the Persians had the Angarium, but the Mongols, they scaled it, weaponized it, turned it into an empire-spanning express lane for military reports, diplomatic updates, intelligence briefs, trade directives, and yes, even personal letters. And it worked. The Mongol postal system became so fast, foreign envoys were stunned. Marco Polo wrote that messages could travel faster under the Mongols than anywhere else on Earth, and he wasn't exactly prone to understatement. If the wind had legs, it might keep up. Maybe. Quirky little twist. Even merchants could use the system if they had the right documents. Some were given their own gerege. That shiny passport you carry, it's not just for state business. It's also your don't get speared at the border card. It grants you fresh horses, shelter and food at stations, access to ferry crossings, priority on the road, and most importantly, fear-based respect. Because refusing a rider with a gerege was tantamount to refusing the Khan himself, which, historically, has been a great way to stop being alive. You tap your belt, yours is bronze, worn smooth from use, engraved with characters that roughly say, "By the power of the eternal blue sky, let this one pass." A little dramatic, but hey, effective. You crest a hill, and the plains open wide beneath you, miles of untouched land, so flat and vast you could probably see your next mistake coming from 2 days away. A river glints far off, probably frozen. Beyond it, a dark line on the horizon. Forest town, hard to say, but it's a waypoint, and you're headed for it. The horse snorts. You murmur something low nonsense, mostly just the sound of a human voice. He responds with a small lurch of speed. You're in sync now. Rider and beast, message and mission. There's no texting out here. No smoke signals. No carrier pigeons wearing tiny hats. There's just this you, a horse, a strip of wind-whipped earth, and a message that could change a kingdom. And somewhere, out in the distance, someone is waiting. Not patiently. You tighten your grip on the reins. No time to dawdle. The Empire is listening. You crest another rise. And there it is again, smoke. Thin and dark, rising steady into the cold air like a thread pulled tight between earth and sky. Another yam station, that unmistakable silhouette. You ease your horse into a trot, then a walk, letting his chest heave. Steam lifts off his coat like mist off a kettle. The station's small, half buried in the slope of a hill for protection. The roof is layered with sod and hide. One side is open to the wind just enough to let smoke from the fire pit escape, just enough to make you wish it wasn't. Still, it's home for a few minutes. A stable hand runs to meet you. You're already swinging down slowly this time. Your knees buckle slightly. You fake a casual stance like you meant to do that. The stable hand doesn't comment. He just hands you a cup of fermented mare's milk, warmish, sour, and let's be honest, probably older than it should be. You drink it anyway. Welcome to life on the Mongol relay. This is how it works. The yam stations are spaced out every 25 to 40 miles, just far enough to push a horse hard, not far enough to kill it. You never sleep in the saddle, no matter what the legends say, but you don't sleep long either. Each station is stocked with essentials, fresh horses, fuel dung, mostly smoky but functional, rations dried meat, salted curd, sometimes onions if you're lucky, guards who make sure you're not followed, and a record keeper who logs your passage like a medieval FedEx scan. Your arrival is noted, your departure is expected. Nothing fancy, just a scratch on a wooden tablet or a scrawl on a bit of parchment, but it keeps the network flowing, and what a network, at its peak. Historians estimate there were over 1,400 yam stations across the Mongol Empire. That's a lot of horses, a lot of dried meat, and a lot of angry station attendants muttering about riders who didn't clean up after themselves. The genius wasn't just in the spacing, it was in the standardization. Each station operated the same way. No matter if you were in the mountains of Tibet or the lowlands of the Don River, you knew what you'd get. You knew what you'd leave. It was the 13th century version of a drive-through, but with less fried food and more risk of wolf attacks. You pat your current mount, hand the reins to the groom, and glance toward the stable. The next horse is already being readied. You catch its eye narrow, suspicious, a little insulted. Good. That means it's got spirit. While you wait, the station guard offers a boiled dumpling. You don't ask what's inside, you eat it in 2 bites. The last rider left 3 hours ago. You've made good time, but this route it's not done yet. You're somewhere on the steppe highway, one of several arterial routes the Mongols maintained. Some ran east-west, linking China with Persia. Others curved north into the Russian forests or dipped south into the deserts of Afghanistan. This one cuts clean across the belly of Asia, through grass and dust and space so wide it feels like the sky was stretched just for you. Historians still argue whether the yam system was meant primarily for military command or for economic integration. Likely, both. The Mongols didn't just want to conquer, they wanted to connect. An army moves on information, so does trade, so does empire, and no scroll gets delivered without a fresh horse. Quirky little side note. Some of the stations developed reputations. Certain ones were known for better food, some for kinder horses, others for having record keepers who didn't scowl quite so much. The elite riders whispered about them like favourite pit stops, legends in felt and mud. Your next horse is ready. Dark grey, sturdy legs, a hide that smells like hot dust and wool. You swing up again, slower now, every joint letting you know it's been several 100 miles since breakfast. You nod to the station keeper, flash your gerege, and with a whistle and a kick, you're flying again. Another 30 miles, another whisper in the wind, another chance to outrun the very history you're helping write. The wind shifts less cruel now, more curious. It presses against your back like an impatient sibling, nudging you forward as the third horse of the day finds its rhythm. Hooves strike the ground in quick, sure beats. The landscape flattens again, rolling into one long canvas of frostbitten grass and pale sky. You tuck the scroll closer to your chest. Not because it's cold though it is, but because it carries the weight of the Khan's authority, which, in case you forgot, is basically absolute. This isn't your average wish you were here letter. It's an imperial message, a moving mandate, a tiny, paper-wrapped sword of command, and you're carrying it. No pressure. You glance down at the gerege again, your passport, your badge, your proof of permission. This small slab of bronze or silver, etched with the royal seal, is more than a travel pass. It's a threat on a chain. Every official, every gatekeeper, every innkeeper and station master knows exactly what it means give this rider what they ask for, or risk explaining yourself to someone who solves problems with fire and arrows. Historians still debate the exact contents and formats of these gereges. Some were inscribed with specific orders, others bore only the Khan's symbol. Some had ornate script, while others looked like they were carved during a gallop. One even included a line historians translated somewhat menacingly as I am the word of the Khan. Obey me as you would him. Cheeky, but it worked. Because once you had that badge, you could do things ordinary people couldn't. You could requisition food, shelter, horses, guides, boats, protection, even labour. Imagine walking into a tavern, flashing a piece of metal, and having the entire place fall into line. And if they didn't, well, there were consequences. One quirky rumour says some couriers were designed to whistle in the wind pierced with holes that created a howling tone during high-speed rides. You know, in case the badge alone wasn't intimidating enough. You ride on now, scarf pulled tight, the metal plate tucked beneath your layers. You feel the slight weight against your chest, reassuring, dangerous. The horse beneath you picks up speed again, sensing your urgency before you even shift your knees. This route is less open now. Trees rise along the trail scrub pines and dry-limbed birch. The path narrows, the silence deepens. You're not just racing time anymore, you're racing obstacles. Because the Mongol relay didn't run through convenient suburbs and groomed trails, it cut through wilderness, mountains, frozen rivers, wolf-haunted passes, and still they built it, station after station, path after path, all linked together by riders with iron lungs and frozen toes. Like you spot a hill crest ahead and know it's time again. Another station waits. You press your heels in. The horse surges forward, wind claws at your hood. Your knees scream a little louder than usual, but you're nearly there. You ride hard over the hill, heart pounding, and just like that, the next outpost appears, a plume of smoke, a cluster of wooden buildings, a watchman standing by a tall pole, eyes sharp, scanning the trail. You wave once. He doesn't wave back, he salutes. Because you, shivering, starving, probably hallucinating a little, are still a rider of the Khan, and that badge on your chest is louder than any drum. You pull up, dismount, toss the reins, and grab the new gerege that will carry you through the next leg. Your old one gets passed backtracked, recorded, sent home. The system keeps itself honest, and then another horse, another mile, another step in a machine built not from gears, but from hooves, wind, and riders who didn't have time to look back. The next horse is wiry and impatient, stomping at the earth like it's insulted to be standing still. A young handler grips the reins tightly as you approach, eyes wide, lips chapped, shoulders pulled up to his ears. You nod once. He releases the animal like a slingshot. You barely get your foot in the stirrup before the horse lunges forward, hooves biting into the frozen soil. This one doesn't wait for you, doesn't care about your sore knees or numb fingers. This one runs like it's got something to prove. Perfect. Because today, you're going to cover more ground than most people dream of in a lifetime, and you're going to do it one horse at a time. Mongol horses weren't just a resource. They were the foundation of the entire relay system. Without them, nothing moved. Not troops, not trade, not the Khan's word. And these horses, they were built for the long haul. Short, stocky, tough as stone, not graceful like Arabian steeds, not elegant like European war horses. But they had one key advantage. They didn't break. You're riding over frozen plains, and your horse doesn't flinch. Through snowdrifts, across rivers, over sand that would grind other breeds into bone. Mongol horses survived off grass and snow, drank from puddles, and could nap standing up. You could leave one outside in a blizzard with a sarcastic note pinned to its mane, and it would still greet you in the morning, probably judging your coat choice. Historians still argue about the number of horses maintained in the yam system. Some estimates suggest more than 300,000 across the empire. Each relay station kept a stock anywhere from 10 to 100 fed, groomed, rotated, and ready to sprint. And here's a quirky twist: horses had reputations. Certain mounts were known for their speed, others for endurance, some for their bad attitude but unmatched pace. Riders would request them by name. Yes, they named them. And if the stable hand grinned and said, "You get Bonebreaker today," you knew it was going to be a fast ride, and maybe a bruised tailbone. You pull your scarf tighter and lean into the gallop. This horse eats up the miles. The landscape flies past wind-blurred trees, rock outcrops, and the occasional startled marmot doing its best impression of someone deeply regretting all life choices. You don't stop for breaks. You drink while riding. A pouch slung across your shoulder holds fermented milk and dried meat. You chew carefully, so you don't choke while trotting. Mongol riders were trained to eat like this. Sometimes they carried blood sausages, or cut a slit in the horse's neck vein to sip blood on long marches. You don't go that far today, but the pouch smells like someone did recently. There's a rhythm to all this. Change horse, ride, deliver, repeat. The Mongol postal system worked because it never stopped. The yam kept rolling even in blizzards, even during wars, even when the message was, "Everything is burning. Please advise." Each rider only did a leg or two. You weren't expected to cross the whole empire. That's what the relay was for. One horse, one sprint, one message. passed from rider to rider like a whisper on horseback, travelling faster than rumour. And there were different types of riders. Some carried military commands, others brought trade updates, some were scouts with observation reports. A few were messenger envoys, delivering diplomatic letters from the Khan himself. These riders had higher privileges and a higher risk of getting accidentally stabbed in the back by ambitious local officials. You, your middle tier, trusted enough to carry real information, not important enough to have bodyguards, the sweet spot of plausible deniability and probable exhaustion. You pass another marker on the road, a carved stone with faded script, Mongol script, vertical and looping, like long strands of wind. You wonder if it's a warning, or maybe just an old route guide, or maybe it says something helpful like, "You're almost halfway there. Please hydrate." You ride until the sun begins to slant, and then you spot it. Another yam post, smoke rising, dogs barking, a groom already standing by a fresh mount. No need to ask. They saw you coming. The network works. You pull up, dismount, stagger, exchange horses, exchange breath, saddle up, and just like that you're off again. New horse, new stretch of land, same message, same speed, 'cause the wind doesn't wait, and neither do you. You're not sure when you last stopped blinking, probably a few miles back, somewhere between the fourth numb toe and the third time you nearly bit your tongue chewing jerky mid-gallop. Doesn't matter, you're locked in now. Saddle legs, frozen face, a scroll pressed tight to your chest like it's breathing with you. But your stomach, it has questions. You're hungry, not politely hungry, rider hungry. The kind of hungry that makes saddle leather look like a snack option. Thankfully, this next yam station mercifully in view now, crouched beside a clump of trees and a shallow stream has food. Sort of. You roll in, half frozen, half flying, and dismount with what might be grace if anyone squints hard enough. A teenage attendant nods at you and disappears into the rear building without a word. You hand off the horse, flex your fingers, and wait for what counts as dinner. Minutes later, a wooden bowl is plunked down in front of you. It's steaming. You don't ask what's in it. Asking leads to knowing, and knowing leads to not eating it. So you dig in. It's salty. It's chewy. It tastes like boiled cloth and beef breath. Delicious. Because in the Mongol yam system, speed came first, nutrition second, and delightful culinary experience somewhere down in the hundreds. You eat fast. You drink faster. The beverage of choice is, as usual, fermented mare's milk erag, cold, tart, slightly alcoholic, and excellent at unclogging your sinuses. It hits the back of your throat like a dare. You swallow. You don't cry. Not outwardly. This isn't five-star dining. This is fuel. Historians still debate how meals were managed across the empire. Did stations all follow a central plan? Did riders bring their own supplies? Some evidence suggests dried provisions were issued weekly. Others say local foraging was part of the gig, especially in rural stretches. Most likely, it was a mix. But one thing's certain, no one lingered. Quirky fact. There are reports of riders eating while riding, tearing strips of dried meat with their teeth and chewing through miles as they chewed through calories. Some tied food pouches under their sleeves for easy access saddle snack technology at its finest. You finish eating, wipe your mouth with the back of your glove. The scroll is still safe. The wind has died down a little, but the cold is no less smug about it. Time to move. A new horse waits, flaring its nostrils, smaller this time, brown, shaggy, with a look that says, "I will not go easy on you." You respect that. You mount again easier now, your body learning to hate you more efficiently with each repetition. The attendant hands you a water skin, you nod, and then, with a click and a tug, you're gone again. The road rises slowly ahead, the cold sharpens again, and the food in your belly turns from weight into willpower. Because the Mongol post didn't pause for gourmet breaks. It powered through with what it had: oats, onions, dried goat fat, flat cakes that doubled as roof shingles if needed. And yet, despite the conditions, this postal system worked relentlessly. A rider could cover 200-300 kilometers a day, switching horses, gulping milk, and snatching sleep on wooden benches between legs of the journey. Not for glory, not for gold, for duty, for the scroll under your coat, for the empire that stitched its people together with hooves and hunger. You crest the next rise, the wind slicing past again, as if to say, "You're late, you're not." But you ride faster anyway, because out here, food isn't comfort. It's just the thing that lets you keep going. The wind is louder now, no longer a whisper, but a song, shrieking low across the steppe in a voice only the reckless understand. You tug your hood tighter and ride harder, the scroll thumping steady against your ribs with every gallop. It doesn't weigh much, and yet it carries enough pressure to flatten entire cities if it arrives late. Because some messages aren't just letters, they're weapons. Out here in the Mongol yam, you're not just carrying invitations or updates. Sometimes you're carrying life or death decisions, military orders, trade agreements, treaty terms, marriage proposals with enough strings attached to sink a dynasty, or more dramatically, the dreaded request for surrender, which, depending on who it's addressed to, is either the start of negotiations or the start of siege engines being oiled. The scroll you're carrying today, you haven't read it, of course, you're not allowed, but the seal on the wax looks serious, and the instructions were clear. Ride like a thunderclap, arrive before sunrise tomorrow, stop for no one. So here you are, outrunning the future. Historians still argue just how much influence individual messengers had in shaping history. Some say they were just delivery boys on horseback. Others believe these riders, intentionally or not, affected timing, tone, and sometimes even outcomes. A message delivered early could save a city. A message delayed might cost a king his crown. There's one recorded case of a rider tasked with delivering a peace proposal to a rival Khan. He arrived 5 hours late. The recipient, insulted by the delay, rejected the offer, and the result was a war that burned half a region. Oops. And here's a quirky bit: some riders were trained not just to carry written messages, but to memorize them word for word. In the event of rain, ambush, or wild goat-related scroll loss, the rider would recite the message from memory. Mongols call this oral riding because, yes, even information needed a backup system. You, personally, have only ever had to recite one message from memory. It was short, just a single line. He accepts the term, reinforcements required, avoid the western pass. It saved hundreds of lives, and you haven't forgotten it. You cross a narrow ridge now. Below, a winding river flashes silver in the starlight. Somewhere beyond that curve is your next yam post, and beyond that the camp, the recipient, the reason for all of this. Your horse falters slightly. You ease back. He's not tired, just uncertain. The path ahead splits briefly two trails, nearly identical, but one curves wide around a cluster of hills, the other cuts straight across. You take the straight one, because the scroll you carry might just be the linchpin in a delicate balance of power, and that means time is the enemy. Always. You think back to stories whispered around fires, tales of messengers who rode through sandstorms, through avalanches, through battlefields still echoing with arrows, men who delivered messages with arrow shafts still stuck in their saddles. One rode over 300 miles in 2 days, stopping only to switch horses and drink broth so salty it probably boiled itself. These weren't myths. These were co-workers. You pass a postmarker rough stone, wrapped with a faded strip of leather. It tells you you're within range. The next station is less than a mile. You press forward, the horse catching your urgency. You can already smell it: smoke, manure, cooking grain. Your nose is still mostly numb, but your memory fills in the gaps. You imagine the warmth of the fire, the bitter tang of mare's milk, the sharp stink of tired horses. Home, in a very Mongol sense. You arrive just as the stars deepen into blue. Dismount, swap horses, resecure the scroll. No talk, no delay. The next leg is the most important, because this message, this tiny, trembling scroll might shift a frontier, might trigger a siege, might save a prince or doom a town. You mount again. The horse rears slightly. You lean forward, whispering the only thing that matters. Go! And together, you vanish into the night. Not just a rider anymore, a messenger of empires. The road disappears beneath your horse like ribbon unrolling in the dark. The hooves beat a rhythm you've come to trust more than any clock, more than any sun. Because on this stretch of yam, there is no sunrise yet, just stars, just breath, just frost and fate, and you one silhouette in an empire-sized relay. And you're dressed for neither comfort nor compliments. Your gear is simple, worn, designed by people who had no patience for style but deep respect for survival. You're wrapped in a long dell, the traditional Mongol coat, thick, heavy, made from layers of felt and hide. It wraps left over right, secured with a wide belt that does double duty as both back support and emergency toolkit. Underneath, thick woolen trousers tucked into high boots rawhide, maybe stitched by your cousin, or your cousin's cousin, or someone your cousin once drank arag with. Mongol boots don't have sharp heels. They're rounded, soft-soled, built not to kick, but to last. And they're curved slightly upward at the toes, not for fashion, but to avoid tearing up the land. Even your hat is doing a job. That conical fur cap isn't for show. It traps heat, shields your ears, makes you look slightly like an angry dumpling but keeps your skull warm enough to think clearly. Quirky little detail. Many Mongol riders didn't wear armour when on relay duty. Too heavy, too loud. And besides, your best protection is speed. If you're wearing metal, you're planning to get hit. If you're doing this right, you won't be anywhere near the arrow when it lands. Historians still argue over how standardized the riders' uniforms were. Some sources claim they were issued state gear. Others suggest riders brought their own, as long as it functioned. Either way, everything had to work, repel wind, wick sweat, dry fast, and never, ever snag on reins. You adjust your scarf now just a strip of cloth, faded from salt and time. You've chewed on it, wrapped wounds with it, tied down scrolls with it in a pinch. It smells like old milk, horse, and 3 different kinds of weather. but it's yours. You wouldn't trade it for silk. The horse hits a patch of soft dirt. You rise in the stirrups slightly, letting your knees absorb the jolt. The saddle creaks. It's high-backed, tight, and closer to a plank of wood than a cushion, but it lets you stand, balance, shift weight without slipping. Mongol saddles were functional machines, often carved from wood, padded with felt and slung over thick saddle blankets to protect the horse's back. The stirrups are metal designed for fast mounting and agile dismounts. Riders were trained to leap off mid-gallop if needed, deliver a message, then remount in motion. You've done it once, didn't go well, you still have a scar. The moon slides higher. Your gear glows silver in places where sweat and weather have worn the leather smooth. You think about how many like you have ridden these paths. How many cloaks have flapped in this exact wind? How many boots have stamped the same frozen soil? There's a kind of communion in it. You're not the first. You will not be the last, but you are one of them, and that matters. You reach for the pouch at your belt, rough leather, patched at the corners, tied with string, inside a flint, a dried meat scrap, a tiny carved token someone gave you back in Karakorum. Good luck, they said, or maybe a reminder. You've forgotten their face, but the token stays, because riders don't need much, just warm legs, a good saddle, a dependable horse, and the ability to ignore discomfort until it becomes background music. You adjust your belt, it holds your knife, your water skin, and your gerege, the badge of your office. It swings gently at your side, catching starlight, a little dented, a little worn, but it shines all the same, like a silent badge that says, I keep the world connected. You lean forward again, speaking softly to your mount. The words don't matter, just the voice, the rhythm, the reminder that you're both still here, still moving, still part of something far bigger than yourself. The cold sharpens again. The wind returns. You don't slow down, because the scroll is still warm against your ribs, and the Empire still waits. The wind picks up, rough and sharp, slapping across your cheek like it's trying to remind you that no matter how fast you ride, nature doesn't care. You hunker lower over the saddle, coat flapping behind you like a banner that's seen better days. The horse's breath fogs into the night, his hooves punching out a relentless beat on the frozen path beneath, and then crack. Not your bones, not the saddle, thunder, low and distant, not a storm too dry for that. You pull the reins just enough to slow the pace. The horse doesn't like it, but he listens, ears flicking, muscles tight. He knows what's coming before you do, because out here, weather isn't your worst enemy. It's the things hiding in it. The Yam system crossed everything. Grasslands, rivers, mountains, deserts, swamps, places where no sane person would build a path. But Mongol messengers weren't concerned with comfort. They were concerned with arrival. So they rode through everything, and they learned to survive it. You ride into a narrow stretch of woodland now, the trees tall and thin, their branches like bony fingers reaching out to comb your scarf. The moon disappears behind clouds. You're alone. Again. Still. Forever. And you feel it, that old tension. The one every rider feels in places like this. The watchful quiet. Wolves. Or worse, bandits. You grip the reins tighter, eyes scanning the brush. No movement, no sound, just the kind of silence that hums louder the longer it lasts. The scroll under your coat seems heavier now. The gerege at your belt feels warmer, like it knows this is one of those moments. Historians still argue just how often Mongol riders faced attacks along yam routes. Some believe the stations were so well defended that threats were rare. Others point to accounts of stolen messages, intercepted reports, and messengers who vanished into the fog. The truth is probably somewhere in between, because the Mongol system dared to go fast across land that didn't want to be crossed, and that land fought back with animals, with terrain, with people who'd rather take a horse than break one. You've heard the stories. One rider was chased for 3 days by a rival clan, switched horses 6 times, ate nothing but snow, delivered the message barely alive and collapsed in the fire pit of the next yam station. Message intact, feet frostbitten. He became a legend. You met his cousin once, also missing 2 toes. Here's a quirky fact: Mongol riders were sometimes trained to mimic bird calls, not to summon birds but to signal each other in forests. A low whistle like an owl meant safe. A staccato chirp meant danger. A certain rising tone meant go quiet and ride like you're invisible. You try one now. Just a short whistle, barely a sound. Nothing answers, which is either very good or very bad. Your horse slows again, snorts, then speeds up, as if deciding this stretch isn't worth the risk. Smart. You exit the forest 20 minutes later, breath held longer than you realized. Ahead, the land opens up again, a ridgeline, another postmarker, another sprint. You don't relax, because this part of the yam, the wild, unpredictable stretch between safety and destination, is where reputation was made. If you got through this, you were more than a courier. You were a ghost rider. The kind other messengers talked about in low voices, with admiration and envy. One story tells of a rider who, when faced with an ambush, rode his horse straight into a frozen river under the ice. He guided his mount through the shallows, under tree roots and frost-slick rocks, holding his breath, trusting the dark. He arrived 4 days late, but the message still dry, still sealed, still terrifying. You can't feel your fingers, your face is numb, but you're upright, and the hooves keep drumming, the wind keeps biting, the scroll keeps pressing against your chest like a second heartbeat, and finally you see it, a cluster of low lights, the next yam post, not safety, but momentum. And in this world, that's enough. You ride harder, faster, not because you're afraid, but because this is what you do. You don't outrun death. You outrun delay. Because someone out there is waiting on a message that only you can deliver, and nothing, not bandits, not beasts, not bitter cold will stop you from reaching them. You thunder into the station like a storm wearing boots, mud flies, snow crunches, dogs bark once, then wisely shut up. You don't dismount so much as fall sideways, catching yourself on the saddle horn before gravity can embarrass you in front of the junior record keeper holding a parchment and a very judgmental expression. You flash the gerege. He bows, low, writes something with frozen ink, doesn't speak. That's fine. You're not in a talking mood anyway, because in this moment, words don't matter. Signals do. You tug your coat twice. The stable hand nods. He disappears. You drop to a knee, flexing your back until something clicks that may or may not have been essential. Another stable hand appears with a new horse. Short, chestnut, twitchy. Good twitchy means fast. You don't rest. You relay. You check your pouch scroll secure. You check your belt knife, water skin, lucky coin still there. You mount again, The record keeper taps the horse once on the flank. That's all it takes. You're off. Again. But this time, this stretch, you're not riding for distance. You're riding for meaning. Because Mongol couriers weren't just delivery boys. They were conduits in a system that pulsed with intent. And when words had to go farther than lungs could shout, those words were placed in the hands of the yam riders, people like you. And to keep all of this running smoothly across 5,000 plus miles of empire, you needed more than speed. You needed a system of communication, a language of motion. You adjust your posture, tilt your head slightly, signal back to the station with your free hand, not a wave, but a twist of the wrist, fingers held in. It means delivered, departing, no trouble, standard stuff. But out here, gestures matter more than sentences. Historians still debate just how formal this sign language of the yam was. Some argue it was codified. Others say it was informal, developed on the trail, passed between riders like saddle sores and bad jokes. But across the yam, there were patterns, gestures, tones of whistle, a flick of reins meaning urgent, a double tug for need escort, a clenched fist raised to signal hostile road ahead. Quirky detail riders carried tokens to indicate message type, coloured cords tied to scrolls, wax stamps shaped like tamga, sometimes even carvings on the scroll tube so that if the message was lost, the finder could still tell if it was military, diplomatic, or just a reminder to send more dried fish. You lean forward now, urging the horse into a gallop. You pass another rider going the opposite way. He nods once, mid-stride, raises 2 fingers, 2 stations ahead, clear. You nod back. No shouting, no slowdown, just code. Because words take too long, and out here, speed is speech. You pass a post carved with swirling marks, a marker for foreign envoys. This stretch is a shared route used by traders, diplomats, scouts. You're not alone anymore, and the stakes just multiplied. The Mongols knew this. The yam wasn't just for Mongols, it was for everyone they allowed. Italian merchants, Persian scholars, Chinese scribes. All could request access if they had the right documents, the right clearance, the right attitude. And if they didn't, they waited, or vanished. You slow just slightly as the trail curves into a low pass. The terrain dips, wind rises. You make a clicking sound with your tongue, short and sharp. The horse adjusts, not because it understands the sound, but because you've made it every time a downhill slope appears. Your pattern is part of your language. It's not about control. It's about conversation. You and the horse. You and the wind. You and every station master who'll see you coming 5 minutes from now and already know what you need because your posture tells them everything. That's the secret of the yam. Not the horses, not the roads, not even the gerege. It's the understanding. That communication isn't always written. It's sometimes a gesture, a nod, a pace, a shadow in the snow that says, I'm still on time, and that's what you are. Still on time, still flying, still part of a whisper so fast, the world can barely keep up. The moon slides higher, full now, heavy as a silver coin resting on velvet sky. Your horse's hooves beat a steady rhythm over frozen ground, like a second pulse underneath your ribs. You haven't seen another human face in hours, not since that lone rider flashed you the 2-finger signal and vanished behind a hill like a dream too urgent to linger. And that's fine. You're used to riding alone. But tonight, that feeling shifts. It sharpens. The trees close in again. The wind's gone quieter, too quiet. You slow slightly. Not fear, not hesitation, just attention. Because there's a truth every Mongol messenger learns early. Not everyone on the Yam Trail is just delivering news. Some are watching it. Because out here, in the endless weave of empire, the line between courier and spy was paper thin and frequently burned afterward. You don't just carry the Khan's words. Sometimes you carry the Khan's eyes. Historians still debate just how formal the overlap between the Yam system and the Mongol intelligence network really was. Some argue that messengers were explicitly trained to report on what they saw: army movements, weather patterns, strange foreign envoys asking strange questions. Others believe it was more opportunistic. If you noticed something suspicious and reported it, congratulations, you are now a part-time spy. Either way, the Yam wasn't just about speed, it was about surveillance. You pass a fork in the path and make a choice left, toward the next station, but as you ride, you glance back over your shoulder, not just a habit, a protocol, because you don't just travel through the empire, you observe it, feel its changes, smell smoke before the reports are written, see dust before armies arrive. You're not a soldier, but you're watching them, and sometimes you're reporting them. You adjust your coat and check the scroll pouch again. Still sealed, still dry, still unread, because that's your job, unless you were trained otherwise. Yes, some messengers were instructed to open messages under specific conditions. If the recipient was dead, if the station had been compromised, if you reached a border and the official was missing, then you didn't just carry information, you became it. Quirky detail. Some riders were issued split scrolls, one half of message, designed to match the other half like a puzzle piece, a primitive form of authentication. If the pieces didn't align, someone was lying or missing, or worse. The empire was built on speed, yes, but it survived on certainty, and that certainty rode with you. You crest a hill and pause, letting the horse walk. Below, a shadowed valley curls like a sleeping beast. A small fire flickers beside a river. Station camp scout post. Hard to tell. You circle wide. Not because you're scared, but because your eyes are working just as hard as your legs. You make a small mark on your glove with soot from your waterskin lid. It'll wash off. But for now, it tells the next station master one unlisted camp. 10 miles back. 2 people. No flags. Standard. Subtle. That's how Yam riders doubled as scouts. Not official reports. Just notice. A shift. A question. A flicker of something unusual. You cross the valley quickly. No interruption. No signal. You let the horse drink once at the stream briefly, quietly, and then you're moving again, like a shadow wearing boots. You're not just part of a delivery system, you're part of a listening system, not the kind that asks questions, the kind that remembers the answers before anyone knew there were questions to ask. Because this road isn't just for mail, it's for meaning. And sometimes it's not about what you carry, it's about what you notice, what you whisper, what you don't write down. But remember anyway, you adjust your scarf, the sky is lightening in the east, you're near the next post. The horse breathes hard but steady beneath you. The wind is back cool, clean, brisk. You ride a little faster, just in case someone's watching you now. After all, the watchers get watched too. The moon has tilted west now, sagging toward the horizon like it's ready to clock out for the night. But you're not. You're still riding, still moving through the bones of the empire, where silence is heavier than snow and the dark smells like sweat, leather, and cold iron. This is Night Rider territory now. And it's not for the faint of heart. Not every Yam Rider volunteered for the midnight runs. Some only rode daylight legs, delivering scrolls between sunrise and supper, stopping when the shadows stretched too long. But you're one of the ones who doesn't sleep when the sky does, because some messages couldn't wait. Some messages couldn't be seen. You ride quieter now, not because anyone told you to, but because the dark demands it. Your horse moves more carefully, hooves muffled by moss and packed dirt. The trees close in. The stars are your map now, and the wind has gone still like it's holding its breath with you. Historians still argue whether night riders were specially selected or just unlucky enough to draw the short straws. But among couriers, riding the graveyard shift earned a different kind of respect. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't clean, but it was vital, because the Mongol Empire didn't stop for bedtime, and neither did its enemies. You reach down and tighten the scroll pouch again. The leather strap squeaks slightly. You wince at the sound, even though there's no one nearby. It's not about danger, it's about discipline. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. The rider who galloped blind through a blizzard, guided only by instinct and the ghost of his horse's memory. The one who crossed a burning village at night with orders meant for the next commander but stopped long enough to pull a child from a fire. The one who vanished without a trace, only to have his scroll arrive at the destination, tied to the saddle of a horse with no rider. Quirky detail. Some night riders tied small bells to their saddles not to be heard, but to not be heard. If the bell jingled, something was wrong. An unexpected jolt, a broken stride. Silence, oddly enough, was safety. You crest a narrow pass now, where cliffs lean in like tired guards and the path feels thinner than your patience. You slow just a little, not for fear, for focus. Because at night, the Yam becomes a whisper network. The road speaks softer, the messages feel sharper, the weight of the Empire shifts, ever so slightly, into your hands. You see the glow before you see the station, a dim red ember tucked behind a curve of rock and trees. No torches, no fanfare, just the kind of light that says we were told to expect you. You dismount without sound. The groom doesn't speak. He takes the horse, pats its neck, disappears. Another brings out a new mount, already saddled. A bowl of warm broth sits waiting on a flat stone. You drink it standing up, half a heartbeat at a time. It tastes like garlic, goat fat, and boiled rain. Delicious. The station master appears a woman, older than the road, face lined like the folds of a map. She hands you a fresh scroll case, sealed in red, urgent. You nod, no need to speak. Everything important has already been said in hoofbeats. Historians write about the efficiency of the Yam, the scale, the architecture, the engineering. They don't write enough about the silence, the trust, the nights like this one, where a single human rides through darkness on a road thinner than memory to carry a message that must arrive though no one knows where he is or what he's endured. You mount again. The new horse dances in place. You guide him forward with a whistle shaped like an old lullaby, and you're off, into the last stretch of night, into a wind that no longer fights you, into a world that only exists for riders like you. Because out here, at midnight, with no audience, no applause, you are the Empire's heartbeat, and it doesn't skip. The stars begin to retreat as the first pale ribbon of dawn unspools across the horizon. It's the hour where even ghosts grow tired, and your horse, strong as he is, starts to falter. Not from weakness, just used energy, used well. You ease him down to a trot, then a walk, and finally, a grateful halt near a crooked tree that looks like it's been thinking about falling over for 20 years, but never got around to it. This is not a yam station. This is a budget break. You dismount carefully, legs trembling just a little. You walk the horse in a slow circle, letting his breath settle. Then you kneel, unwrap your water skin, and drink what's left. Warm, slightly sour, perfect. Because everything in this system, this vast, beautiful, collapsing in on itself system, is about movement management, and it took a lot to keep it running. See, what no one tells you is that the Mongol postal system wasn't just an engineering marvel, it was an economic one. Behind every galloping rider like you were hundreds, thousands of workers, people whose only job was to keep the yam breathing. You had blacksmiths who fixed horseshoes for animals that didn't even wear them, just in case. Cooks who prepared enough dumplings to feed armies of constantly arriving strangers. Local villagers tasked with growing grain, drying meat, boiling broth, and chopping wood. And of course, station masters often appointed by the Khan himself who kept the logs, enforced the rules, and sent very scary letters when supplies were late. Historians still argue about the budget of the yam system. Some say it drained resources like a leaky water skin. Others claim it was the resource the road that kept taxes flowing, armies coordinated, trade balanced. A few Persian records suggest entire regions were economically defined by how many stations they supported. And here's a quirky fact: some towns tried to bribe their way out of hosting yam stations. Too much cost, they said. Too many horses to feed. Too many riders coming through at all hours demanding food, shelter, and scroll seals. Did it work? Of course not. You don't say no to the Khan's postmen, and the Empire made sure of that. Whole tax structures were developed just to fund this network. Farmers were obligated to provide fodder. Craftsmen donated goods. Wealthier nobles sometimes sponsored stations along key routes, partially for prestige, partially to not get on the wrong side of the administration. It was the world's first subscription service for urgent geopolitics, and it was enforced by more than goodwill. Delay a rider, you'd get a fine. Steal a relay horse, you'd get executed. Burn a station. Let's just say the Khan had opinions about arson. You stand again now, brushing the dust from your knees. The horse nuzzles your side, not affection, just curiosity. He's ready for the next stretch. He knows the rhythm, knows what you are. A node in the living system, a link in the longest chain of logistics the pre-modern world had ever seen. The scroll's still tucked close, its seal is unbroken. The gerege at your belt swings as you walk back to the path. It's metal, sure, but it costs so much more than that. Behind this one badge is an entire fiscal network, the labour of hundreds, the sweat of thousands, the cooperation of communities you'll never meet, and the faith of an empire that believes you will deliver this message no matter what. You mount again, not fast, not flashy, just steady. And as the first light cracks over the hills, you ride with it, not just a courier, not just a name in a dusty ledger. You're a budgeted miracle, and the system is still counting on you. The sun finally climbs over the edge of the world like it's been dragged reluctantly from sleep. Warm gold light spills across the plains, lighting up frost crystals and highlighting the 1,000 tiny details you missed in the dark, the hoofprints of last night's rider, the discarded strip of wool cloth snagged on a thorn bush, the way the grass bends where a deer slept not long ago. And in the distance, silhouetted against the new light, you see it, a caravan, not a station, not a military camp, a travelling node in the system. Because the Mongol yam wasn't only about static relay points, it was also about motion, about building routes not just between towns but between people. And in some cases, those people moved. You approach carefully. Your horse slows, sensing a shift in your posture. You raise your hand not high, not aggressive. A traveller's greeting. They wave back. 5 riders, 2 pack animals, a cart groaning under crates, likely diplomats or merchants granted passage, and more importantly, allowed to use the yam, because here's the real flex of the Mongol system. It didn't just carry messages, it carried the world. From Baghdad to Beijing, from Kiev to Korea, the yam was the bridge across kingdoms, cultures, and contradictions. You might pass a Persian mathematician riding the same route as a Chinese herbalist, each with their own documents, their own dialects, but both carrying the Khan's stamp of travel permission. Historians still marvel at how well this worked. The Mongols' bringers of chaos, as legend likes to paint them, were also the architects of a communication system that allowed ideas, goods, and people to cross what used to be dangerous, divided, and disjointed land. And quirky fact, foreign dignitaries were often escorted by official messengers, a kind of cultural Sherpa. These weren't bodyguards, they were navigators, riders who knew the yam routes like the back of their cracked, wind-burned hands. Who could point out which river crossing flooded early, which station had the strongest horses, and which shortcut saved you 2 hours in a faceful of swamp? You ride up to the caravan slowly. One of the riders, an older man with Persian features and the unmistakable stoop of someone who's been sitting on saddle since childhood, smiles broadly. He speaks your language. You trade words, just the usual. Wind from the east cold enough to freeze ambition. Any trouble, only from boredom. You show your gerege. He shows his scroll sealed in green wax. Trade document, probably. You nod, and he gestures toward the fire pit in the center of their makeshift camp. You don't stop, but you smile, because the system is still working, even out here, 1,000 miles from capital cities. With no stone walls or senate halls, this is what empire looks like. Cooperation without a common tongue. Trust based on stamped metal and the shared understanding that if either of you delays the other, someone way above both of your pay grades will be extremely disappointed. You part ways with a nod, back to your path, back to your message, back to the pulse of the road. And as the trail opens wide again, you think about all the languages riding on the wind beside you. A diplomat from Venice writing to the Khan's court, a Mongol general issuing commands to a Persian outpost, a scholar from Bukhara sending medical recipes eastward, a merchant from Samarkand tracking silver prices in Cathay, all of it moving, all of it connected, all of it faster than anything the world had ever seen. You pass another postmarker, another 2 hours and you'll reach the next station. The horse is holding strong, your scroll is still safe. The sun is higher, now brighter. You let yourself smile, because you're not alone. You never really were. You're one of many riders, traders, envoys, translators, all part of the living network. And the message you carry, it's not the only one. But right now, It's the most important. The sun is almost rude now, hot and high, searing through the cold with that dry midday light that makes the dust seem brighter than snow. You're sweating under your coat, even though the wind still has teeth. Your horse, too, is dark with effort, foam clinging to his flank like salt crust. You press forward, the scroll under your coat still secure, but the road ahead suddenly feels heavier, not because of the weight you're carrying, but the history behind it, because there's a darker side to every fast road, and this one carried plague. Not rumour, not legend, actual plague. You shift your weight, eyes scanning the land ahead. Nothing but dry grass and quiet now, but the stories still cling to the trail like smoke that never lifts. Because when the Mongol Empire built the yam, they didn't just create the fastest communication system in the world, they may have built the fastest disease vector too. Historians still argue just how much the Mongol postal routes contributed to the spread of the Black Death. Some point to merchant ships and rats and seaports. Others raise an eyebrow at the sheer efficiency of land-based messengers racing across Eurasia carrying letters, supplies, news, and sometimes fleas. The timing certainly lines up. When the plague began sweeping west from Central Asia in the 1330s, it moved with a speed that shocked even seasoned chroniclers. Entire towns vanished. Cities lost half their populations in weeks, and the routes it followed, suspiciously similar to the paths of the yam. And here's a quirky, horrible fact. There are reports, credible ones, that some Mongol forces weaponized plague. During the siege of Kaffa in 1346, Mongols allegedly catapulted plague-infected corpses over the walls, turning their enemy's water supply into a death sentence. Not exactly your average military strategy, and what made it work? Speed. The same speed you ride with now, the same speed that once kept an empire alive, also helped dismantle the world that came after it. But it's not just disease. The yam was also used to spread panic. Imagine hearing that an army had crossed the Oxus River. Imagine hearing that 3 days before your village sees its dust cloud. Messages could outrun armies, and in doing so, sometimes became more terrifying than the armies themselves. Information when it moves too fast can be a weapon. That's what you feel now. Not guilt, not pride, just a heavy awareness that every system built for order can also carry chaos. You adjust the scarf over your nose, not out of fear there's no plague now, not here, not anymore, but the memory of it lingers, carried like dust in the seams of your coat, in the dry earth under your horse's hooves. You pass a marker stone, half buried and leaning. You stop for a moment, just long enough to notice the carving a faint, weathered image of a bird, wings stretched wide, eyes turned east. Some riders once called these stones warning birds, not because they spoke, but because they remembered. You urge your mount forward, not faster, just steadier, because this part of the route doesn't ask for speed, it asks for respect. You think of the riders who came before you who rode just as fast, but didn't live long enough to make it home. Some fell to illness, some to exhaustion, some simply vanished. Into fog, into myth, into footnotes, at the bottom of the old scrolls. And still the yam went on. The stations stayed open, the horses kept running, the scrolls kept arriving. Because even if the route carried death, it also carried continuity, a system that, for all its flaws and fears, refused to stop. You pull your hood down again, letting the sun warm your face, and you keep riding, Not because you're certain, not because it's easy, but because the world still needs its messages delivered, and you are, for better or worse, the one still holding the reins. The sun dips westward now, sliding down the sky like someone slowly dimming the world. Shadows stretch across the road, long and lazy, and the wind shifts again cooler, more curious. You smell water in the air, maybe a river, maybe a lake, definitely a station nearby. Your horse snorts, ears flicking forward. He knows it too. You crest a low hill, and there it is, a cluster of wooden huts, half ringed with brush and crude fencing. Smoke curls from one roof. A tethered line of horses shifts along the fence, tails flicking, hooves clinking. A dog barks once, then thinks better of it. You ride in, and all eyes turn, because you are wearing the gerege, and this is a postal outpost, not just a place to swap horses and slurp broth. It's a nerve ending in the brain of the empire. Everything here is measured in urgency. You dismount, tired, sore, but still on time. The station master, a broad-shouldered man with eyebrows like battle standards, nods in recognition. He doesn't ask your name. He checks the scroll case at your side, sees the seal. His face changes. He turns to the attendant behind him and snaps something fast in Mongolian. A new horse appears almost immediately. You recognize the type fast, narrow-chested, lean-muscled, and probably a little insane. These are the ones they save for high-risk routes. And then the station master points to a crate beside the stable door. Inside scroll fragments, torn wax seals, shredded satchels, evidence of messengers who didn't make it. Not a warning, a reminder. Because this system doesn't tolerate failure. It doesn't have time for grief. If a message doesn't arrive, someone else rides. The message gets rewritten, the mission gets reassigned, the system rolls on. And yet, the price is not forgotten. Historians still argue about what happened to riders who failed. Some accounts describe harsh punishments, flogging, exile, execution. Others suggest more leniency if the rider could prove the delay was unavoidable. But the reputation of the yam was unforgiving. You either delivered, or you didn't. And if you didn't, the Empire noticed. Here's a quirky fact: there were postal inspectors officials who rode the same routes at random intervals, checking for delays, missing supplies, bad food, lazy station masters, or fraudulent gereges. They'd show up without warning, take notes, and then disappear just as fast. If your station failed the inspection, you might lose your post or your teeth. Because this wasn't a hobby. It was a system of national consequence. Borders depended on it. Treaties relied on it. A misplaced letter might change the fate of a kingdom. You mount the new horse, narrower saddle, tighter reins. The scroll is still under your coat, still warm, still sealed. Your body protests the motion, but your mind is already moving. You nod to the station master. He doesn't return it, because there's nothing left to say. You've rested. You've resupplied. You're already late. You ride out again, barely 3 breaths between arrival and departure, and that's exactly how it's supposed to work. Because the yam isn't a road, it's a heartbeat, and right now, you're the pulse pushing through the arteries of empire, carrying a message whose contents you'll never read, but whose importance you feel with every mile. The sky grows darker behind you. The next leg is longer, the path rougher. This is the section marked with crossed blades on the old maps, a sign of bandit risk. tribal unrest, or just particularly unfriendly wildlife, you keep riding anyway, because the system doesn't care about danger. It only cares that the scroll arrives. You ride faster. The road narrows to a thread, winding between low ridges where the grass grows stiff and the air smells like copper and pine smoke. Somewhere behind you, the sun slips below the hills and doesn't say goodbye. The sky dims, washing itself in bruised purples and flickers of early stars. It's the hour when the birds fall silent, when the wind loses interest, when the world holds its breath. You keep going, because out here, slowing down is a choice you don't have. The horse beneath you breathes hard, not from exhaustion yet, but from effort. He's young, built for speed, but even he is starting to flick his ears in irritation. He doesn't like this stretch. Neither do you. This is where messages vanish. Not the paper, not the scroll, the messenger. You pass a crooked waypost stone, jagged, leaned into the wind like it's hiding from something. There's no marking, but you know what it means. This is one of the zones where the Mongol Empire had to learn the hard way that information comes at a cost. Bandit country, disputed borderland, thin yam coverage, old grudges hiding behind rocks. Historians still argue how secure the yam routes truly were. Some say the Mongols' brutal punishments kept the roads cleaner than a monk's conscience. Others insist there were still gaps regions where local clans, hostile raiders, or the occasional warlord decided the Khan's laws didn't apply. And here's the thing, they were usually right, until the riders arrived. The yam couriers weren't soldiers, but they rode like they were. Some travelled armed, some wore hidden blades or carried short bows strapped beneath their saddlebags. You don't carry a weapon tonight, just a knife. Not enough to fight a gang, just enough to finish the scroll if they catch you. Yes, that's a thing. You've heard the stories, riders who swallowed messages to keep them secret, riders who burned them mid-chase, choking on ash so no enemy could read the Khan's intent, riders who wrapped scrolls in wax and sank them in wells, only to return later and retrieve the message when the coast was clear. Quirky detail, some yam posts kept duplicate scrolls hidden in stone jars. If a rider failed to arrive in time, a second messenger was launched same route, different start time, often without warning. A fail-safe, not a backup plan, a second chance. You hear something, not close, not yet, but it moves. Branches hooves, voices carried on the tail of the breeze. You lean forward, lowering your body. You tighten the reins just a bit. Your horse knows. He shifts into a faster trot, ears pinned back, breath quickening. You don't look back. You never look back unless you have to. You crest another hill. Below, nothing. Just more grass, more road, more possibility. So you ride harder, because if they're behind you, they won't catch you. And if they're ahead of you, they'll have to earn the scroll. This system wasn't built for cowards. The Mongol Empire didn't span continents because it waited politely. It moved. It demanded. It punished delay like treason. You wipe the sweat from your brow, even though the air is cooling fast. You grip the reins tighter. Your knees ache. Your back shouts. Your eyes sting from staring too long at twilight. But the next station is only 6 miles ahead. Just 6 more, and you know the horse can make it. Because he hasn't stopped. Because you haven't stopped. Because this message cannot stop, whatever it says. Military orders, trade alerts, personal decrees. It's been passed from hand to hand, from hoof to hoof, across more miles than you care to count. It's older than most rivers by now, and it's nearly home. You press forward, the path bends, the light fades, the wind forgets its name, and still, you ride, because someone tried to stop this message, but you didn't let them. The last light of the day fades behind you, replaced by a deep velvet darkness that wraps around the road like a blanket pulled too tight. There are no stars now, just cloud cover and silence. The kind of silence that feels intentional. The kind that suggests the road itself is listening. You feel it in your bones. The yam is changing beneath you, not the physical trail. You're still on the route, still passing those same smooth-worn markers, still trusting your horse's instincts more than your own. But something in the system has shifted. Not long ago, every station was manned, every path was patrolled. The scrolls moved like blood through veins, regular, powerful, unquestioned. But now the next station is dark. You arrive to find the fire pit cold, the stables empty, the door of the station house swinging gently on its hinges. No dogs, no horses, no watchman with fur-lined sleeves and a steaming bowl of meat broth. Nothing, just absence. And that tells you more than any message ever could. Because this is how it begins. The slow collapse. Historians still debate when the yam began to unravel. Was it after Genghis? After Kublai? Was it the Black Death that fractured the rhythm, or the splintering of the empire into rival khanates, each jealous of its stretch of road? It doesn't really matter. What matters is the effect. A station unmanned is a message undelivered. A message undelivered is a decision unmade. A decision unmade is power lost. You dismount slowly, ears tuned for any sound and echo, a rustle, even a cough. Nothing. Just wind threading through the grass and the occasional creak of wood under its own weight. You walk the perimeter. You knock on the door frame. Still nothing. Quirky fact. In the final decades of the unified Mongol Empire, some yam posts began to fake activity. Station masters kept fires burning and horses tethered just long enough to look operational when inspectors rode by. But the scrolls weren't moving. They were sitting, piling up in drawers, tucked beneath beds, forgotten like crumbs in a great feast that had ended too fast. You step back outside, the horse shifts, uneasy. You have a choice. Wait here. Hope someone returns. Hope the next link in the chain hasn't broken too. No, you mount again, because the message hasn't changed. Only the road has. You ride on, picking up a faint trail to the south, an alternate path. One not officially part of the yam anymore. But it was once. The old tracks are still there if you know what to look for an odd bend in the trees. A dry well with one stone too smooth. A glint of rusted metal buried in the weeds. The ghosts of efficiency. The memory of movement. Because even as the yam fades, you still ride. And that is its last strength. The riders. Some still remain. Not many. But enough. Enough to remember how it worked. Enough to carry the scrolls even when the stations fail. Even when the Empire doesn't send replacements. Even when the reward is silence. You ride through the night. A rogue rider now. Unsanctioned. Unstoppable. Because you still know what this system once was, and more importantly, you know what it could be again. You ride because the message still matters. And somewhere, in the dark ahead, someone still waits to receive it. A general who needs orders, a merchant waiting on news, a prince whose fate hinges on a sealed scrap of parchment carried by one rider with sore knees and stubborn lungs. You grip the reins tighter. You whisper something to the wind, not a prayer, a promise. The yam may be breaking, but you aren't. The sky begins to glow again, not with full dawn, not yet, but with the cool grey promise of morning. The blackness around you softens, and the world exhales as if it survived something without realising it. And maybe it has. Maybe you have. Because you're still riding, still carrying the scroll, still moving, even as the empire that built this road begins to fray at the seams. The horse under you is flagging now, chest heaving, steps shorter. But he's still going. You pat his neck gently, not in thanks yet, but in understanding. You both know the destination is close. And then, over the next rise, you see it. Not a station, not a camp, a wall, high, wooden, sturdy enough to keep out small armies and just welcoming enough to admit a tired courier without a challenge. A watchtower rises over the top, and you catch a flutter of something pale in the breeze, a flag bearing the Khan's seal. You slow as you approach. A guard appears. He squints into the half-light, sees the gerege hanging from your belt, and nods. He doesn't ask questions. He just opens the gate, because he knows what you are. You dismount stiffly, boots scraping the packed dirt. Someone takes your horse. Someone else brings water, not for you, but for the scroll. You hand it off like a midwife presenting a newborn. The official on the other end accepts it silently, breaks the seal, doesn't even look up, because for him, the scroll is just data. But for you, it was everything. The last mile was the hardest, the most broken, the most real, because by now you understand the yam was never just about roads, or horses, or scrolls. It was about belief that a system could stretch across the entire known world, that a message could matter more than comfort, that a rider could become the living thread between cities, khans, and centuries. You sit now, finally. You let your muscles sag, your breath slow, your fingers uncoil from reins that are no longer in your grasp, and you look back at the trail. It's empty again, but it hums with memory, because this empire may fade, its khans may fall, its stations may rot into dust, but someone will always remember the sound of hooves in the night. Someone will always ask, how did the word travel so fast? And maybe, just maybe, someone will answer, there were riders, there were horses, there were scrolls wrapped in sweat and frost. And there was a road that connected the world, even if only for a moment, even if only through you. Now that the scroll is delivered and the road behind you is quiet, let yourself rest. Breathe in slowly, like you're still in the saddle, watching the horizon shift beneath the early morning sky. Feel the tension leave your shoulders, like the weight of a gear-laden belt finally unbuckled after 100 miles of motion. Let your thoughts drift, gently now, like dust rising off the trail just after dawn. There's nothing more to carry, no more stations, no more hooves to count. The empire will manage itself for a little while, at least. You've done your part, and the road, always waiting, will still be there the next time it calls. Let your mind wander back through the journey, the icy winds, the warm broth, the cold stables and sudden fires, the unread scroll pressed to your chest like a second heartbeat. You move through storms, wolves, watchers, through shadows that swallowed stations and memories, and still you arrived. You always arrive. Now, feel your breathing settle. Let your limbs go still. Let your heart slow to the rhythm of a sleeping horse. No need to ride tonight. No need to stay alert. The scroll is delivered. The system, for now, still hums. And you can rest in the quiet between messages. Sleep well, rider. The world turns.